Senate, Governor, Attorney General, Congress. The 2026 board is set, and the stakes have never been higher. Will the Texas First record hold? Or is it time for a new guard in Austin and D.C.? We go one-on-one with the candidates and fact-check the campaign trail in real time. Polls, players, and pure Texas politics. This is Battleground Texas.
Hello, I'm Greg Grugan. Let's jump into the day's political headlines. All right, first, the Lone Star Liberty PAC announced a multi-city early vote rally featuring Senate hopeful Ken Paxton. The tour will make about 9 stops starting February 16th. In D.C., a political firestorm is growing as Senate Democrats warn of potential ICE deployment at polling places this November. They fear the administration will use ICE to intimidate Latino and mixed status families, even if they are legal citizens. ICE leadership flatly denies any such orders. This all comes after President Trump called to nationalize the voting in some locations. Now, the White House is downplaying the threat, with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt insisting, quote, the president respects the Constitution. And new data from the Hobby School shows a stark divide in how Texans view the president's performance. While he maintains a 4-point net approval on immigration and border security, the numbers flip on the economy. 55% of Texans now disapprove of his handling of inflation, marking a 12-point decline that could become a major flashpoint as we head into the March primary. Let's bring in my colleagues Stephen Dial in Dallas and Rudy Koski in Austin. Rudy, our friend Bill King reporting in his column this week that as of today, President Trump's approval rating on immigration nationally has plummeted since last March by 40% among independent voters, which says to me, White House, you've got a problem.
Yeah, they got a problem there, Greg. No one likes that tough love, right? The polls reflecting Trump's decision to walk away from the border crisis as an issue after essentially shutting down the illegal crossings, thinking, all right, the problem's over with. Well, I've heard pundits like Karl Rove today say that Trump should have spent more time in border cities talking about economic recovery to protect the Hispanic votes that he got in the previous election. Instead, the administration simply miscalculated on how Democrats would literally fight back against deportation rates. Most analysts expecting immigration is going to continue to be a primary issue for Democrats. For Republicans, not so much. But after the May runoffs, it's anticipated GOP candidates will launch some type of media blitz on how illegal immigration fight is about victims like Jocelyn Nugeri and Laken Riley. Greg?
Stephen, there's another shoe dropping on the national level. The president's much ballyhooed flip of the Hispanic vote in 2024 appears to have been squandered, dropping 25 points on the immigration issue alone in just 10 months. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to see how long we see these student walkouts. Now, while many of them don't have votes, these visuals are starting to build. Today alone, Dallas ISD schools, the largest school district in our area in DFW, has started to have walkouts, and we saw hundreds of students this morning. The ICE issue, Greg, is not going away.
All right, looking to throw fuel on that anti-Trump fire is Houston Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, who has filed legislation to unshackle local governments from mandatory cooperation with ICE.
You know, ICE is terrorizing our communities. They're threatening our cities. They're just tearing our country apart, trampling over the Constitution. It's just almost abhorrent and unconscionable, some of the actions that they're taking in Minneapolis, and we're doing some to some degree in Chicago and LA, and for me, I just don't want to see any of that here in Houston or any other city. So my legislation is really very simple. It goes straight to the section of the Immigration Act that gives the federal government the authority to mandate to cities what to do on immigration. It just repeals it, which means we take local control back to local communities so they can decide their public safety priorities, so they can decide what they want to do to make their community safe without any mandates from the federal government. We don't need to make a traffic stop a deportation trap. We cannot make police officers ICE officers. It doesn't say that the cities can't cooperate. It just says they can't mandate it. So I think this would resolve so many issues of what's going on around our country.
Would that run afoul of the supremacy clause in any way, or would the legislation take care of that?
Well, the legislation really would clear it up, that it is the role of the federal government, and that they can't then turn around and try to delegate it and push it on cities. You know, they're threatening cities. They're telling cities, if you don't cooperate with ICE, the $200 million you get in federal funds to help with policing initiatives and police, overtime pay, whatever it's for, we're going to take it back. They're terrorizing our communities. They're trying to tell cities what to do in this arena, and it's just wrong. In the mix is the bill that was passed in Austin that tells cities that if they don't cooperate, then they'll lose state funds. So they're getting hit both ways. The state's saying you have to cooperate, and the feds are saying you should cooperate, otherwise you'll lose our funds too. Both of those staffs are kind of the moment that we're waking up, because it's no longer, Greg, just about immigration. It's about our freedoms, our freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of association, the freedom from fear. People just are afraid, whether or not they're immigrants, they're afraid because these two people were citizens. We got to make sure that they have proper training, that they have the same code of conduct that a police officer does. Make sure that they have real warrants signed by a judge, not signed by one of their own peers. We've got to make sure that they follow the rules and that they're there to provide order, because right now it's just chaos, cruelty, and violence.
For the record, Congresswoman Garcia faces two primary challengers, Jarvis Johnson and Robert Slater. As of right now, neither has weighed in on the president's comments. Okay, we want to hear from you on the topic of elections. Who should have final authority over how Texas elections are secured and monitored on Election Day? The state, meaning the governor and secretary of state. The feds, meaning the White House, which could mean deployment of federal agents like ICE to ensure integrity, or no agents near polling sites to avoid intimidation. Scan the QR code, vote, and comment, and we'll have those responses a little later for you. Stay with us, because Battleground Texas will be right back. Welcome back. On Capitol Hill today, the leaders of Immigration and Customs Enforcement waging an intense defense of the agency's actions as Democrats launched wave after wave of harsh criticism.
As recent events have demonstrated, though, our officers and agents are increasingly facing an unprecedented level of aggressive interference and intimidation when executing the laws that you have asked them to enforce. These attacks on federal law enforcement personnel are coordinated and well-funded. This is not peaceful protest. No law enforcement officer should be put at personal risk simply for doing the job that we have asked them to do.
We are facing the deadliest operating environment in our agency's history. In fiscal year 2025, death threats against ICE personnel increased more than 8,000%. Assaults on officers have skyrocketed over 1,400%. One officer in Minnesota had his finger bitten off by a protester, egged on by elected officials characterizing our officers as Gestapo or secret police.
There has been no accountability in your agency under the Trump administration, none. Your agency has repeatedly been caught on tape using unnecessary violence against civilians, and you can't even tell me if any of these agents have been investigated or disciplined.
That references to ICE as the Gestapo or the secret police encourages threats against ICE agents.
100%.
The problem is you have it backwards, sir. People are simply making valid observations about your tactics, which are un-American and outright fascist.
But your agencies are unaccountable, paramilitary forces, and I have just as much respect for you as I do for the last white men who put on masks to terrorize communities of color. I have no respect for the inheritors of the Klan Hood and the Slave Patrol.
Gestapo, stormtroopers, thugs, Klansmen, Slave Patrol. The pejorative labels flew in a barrage-like fashion for hours. Stephen, Democrats are looking to bust out the whooping stick and pound this issue all the way to the midterms, and if it still polls well, all the way to 2028. How's it playing up in the Metroplex?
Oh, it's definitely a big topic. And aside from the student walkouts that I talked about in our last block, you know, just yesterday when I talked to the Texas Democratic Party Chair Kendall Scudder, he said that Republicans, in his words, are the party for fewer government, less government, and he believes that this is government overreach. ICE and immigration enforcement, be it right or wrong, depending on what people are saying, is a topic that people care about regardless of your nationality. Greg?
All right, Rudy, if you're in the Trump White House or a Republican in a tight race, how do you deal with this issue? I mean, it was just 2 years ago that literally millions of unvetted foreign nationals were walking into the country with absolute impunity.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the Democrats are, you know, saying local control, and just a few years ago they were condemning Governor Abbott for trying to do something down on the border, saying you don't have that authority. But you know, Republicans will have to remind voters about who opened the borders, and that the deportation crisis is a direct result of the Biden administration. Analysts who I've spoke to say that the effort to redefine this narrative on immigration, you know, it's being slow walked right now with changes and tactics on the ground being done now. But a full press, expect that coming after the primaries, Greg.
All right, Stephen, you know, you heard some of the talk there on Capitol Hill over and over again, demonizing the ICE agents. Fair, unfair?
I mean, some of these words, I mean, all of these agents are not, I don't even want to give an opinion about bad people, but they're making blanket statements. They're making statements that they know their base will like. Of course, there are men and women who are actually working to protect our citizens or enforce the law. And just like anything else, the bad incidents are being magnified more than the other incidents.
Quickly, Rudy, any thoughts there?
Yeah, you know, you just can't basically claim foul when you actually commit the fouls. And these protests are inciting the officers to react. They're being attacked, and the officers are responding. So, you know, cause and effect.
All right, stay with us. Battleground Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As is hardly uncommon during the frothy intensity of primary season, the most incendiary statements folks on a mission can harvest and hoard get tossed into the fray. Exhibit A, this statement by Texas House Minority Leader Gene Wu.
I always tell people the day the Latino, African American, Asian, and other communities realize that they share the same oppressor is the day we start winning. Because we are the majority in this country now. We have the ability to take over this country and to do what is needed for everyone.
Woo! In my book, that was a stone-cold dog whistle, and frankly, not exactly a rarity from the Houston Democrat, as I think Stephen and Rudy will confirm. Of course, that didn't stop a cascade of reaction from Republican candidates like Attorney General hopeful Aaron Reitz, who posted on X, "As AG, I want to see Gene for Texas denaturalized." On what basis? He likely concealed his anti-American sentiment throughout his citizenship app process, the details of which are conspicuously absent from the public record. Wu is a subversive whose citizenship should be revoked, end quote. Of course, as Reitz is fully aware, even if elected, he would have less than zero power to rescind Wu's citizenship. But why confuse a hyperbolic threat with the facts? Fellas, cannot wait to hear your reaction. Rudy?
Yeah, that comment from Reitz was just, far left field. He has absolutely zero power. And I think Gene Wu came across as a child, and maybe that's why the stuff on the app isn't there with his family. The soundbite is important to note. From Gene Wu came in 2024. Why it resurfaced now? Probably a political bowl of spaghetti to see if it sticks to the wall. Bottom line, it was bad then, bad now, but it seems to also be in harmony with the dog whistle being blown by Democrats trying to see what issues will actually stick. We tried affordability, trade, killing drug runners, how terrible that was, deportations now. So, it's just spaghetti, political spaghetti, Greg.
All right. Stephen Reitz was hardly alone with Ken Paxton, Mays Middleton, and even Matt Rinaldi, all swinging at what they clearly saw as a hanging curveball, collectively answering a dog whistle with a dog whistle. Agree or disagree?
Agree, because, these elected officials, they know what they are saying, and they know that they can use other wording. Now, if you look at the heart of what Gene Wu said, he could have just said, and like Rudy alluded to, this is old, but he could have just said, when minority voters realize that we are the majority in this state, we could start, passing things that we care about. It's all about the wording. And yeah, the response from the Republicans, it's politics. And like Rudy said, they're just trying to see what sticks for their base.
Yeah, Rudy, Evan Mintz, who's the Houston Chronicle editorial chief, called up Wu and said, what did you mean here? And he said, well, I was talking about Republicans. Does that wash with you?
I'm sure he was talking about Republicans, but, being a white Democrat right now, to be walking around with Gene Wu, I'd have to feel really uncomfortable and kind of like take a double take and maybe a step, to distance myself from that. It's unfortunate that it was said. It was terrible that it was said. But it's also that big mistake that the Democrats make the assumption that if you're a minority, you're with them. And we saw in this last election, especially with the Hispanic vote going Republican, being a minority doesn't mean that you're going to be one specific party member. It's a huge, gross assumption. Greg?
Yeah, assumptions. They're all over the place this political season. We will leave it there, but don't go away. More Battleground Texas to explore on the other side of this break. Plenty of clashes across Battleground Texas. I want to go back to that breaking news at the top of the show. Ken Paxton finally breaking out of the bunker with a 9-stop tour of the Lone Star State. For those unaware, the Texas Attorney General turned U.S. Senate candidate has given the full-blown Heisman to any Q&A sessions with major TV or newspaper outlets as he remained basically bunkered in as Cornyn's millions of dollars worth of character issue artillery shells burst overhead in 20 media markets. My question, will Paxton take questions on his Texas tour, or will these appearances be highly orchestrated and totally sheltered? Rudy?
Yeah, you know, it's good to see that he climbed out of Biden's basement. Is that where he's been lately? Look, guys, I'm going to be talking about the primary race that's getting hot just south of Austin. That is the Congressional District 21 race. It's really starting to heat up. The GOP primary looks like a pro sports draft board with dozens of contenders, including former major leaguer player Mark Teixeira. You may remember him. He was a Ranger. He was a Yankee. He was a Brave. He was an Angel. He's in play. Getting a lot of love from Trump, got the Trump endorsement, the other dozen or so other candidates saying he's nothing more than a carpetbagger. It's getting hot down there. Could go into extra innings, though. Stephen.
All right, guys, what I'm looking at, how many of these primary races are headed to a runoff? We already know that the U.S. Senate race for the Republican side likely heading to a runoff. The Attorney General's race, at least on the Republican side, but maybe the Democrat side too, heading to a runoff. And Rudy talked about a congressional race. I keep mentioning this. District 33, Julie Johnson and Colin Allred. Allred has been in the news since that spicy Tallarico video. We're going to have to leave it there. That's all the time we have. To see this or any of our past, go to our YouTube channels.
And keep that conversation going on our social media accounts.
Tomorrow on Battleground Texas, more breaking poll results from the UH Hobby School, and I'm hearing the results will snap more than a few heads. See you then. Vaya con Dios.